President Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy have signed a long-term security agreement. The two leaders held a joint press conference earlier today at the G7 summit in Italy. Our Nancy Cordes has the latest from there.
Good evening. President Biden stood on the stage behind me a short time ago, and alongside the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the two men signed a historic agreement. This would essentially commit the U.S. to supporting Ukraine for the next 10 years with military assistance, military training, intelligence sharing, all designed to send a message to Vladimir Putin in Russia that the U.S. is not going anywhere, that he can't simply wait America out, as President Biden said. That was just one of several major developments on the Ukraine front here in Italy today at the G7 summit. The G7 leaders, including President Biden, came to an agreement to provide a $50 billion loan to Ukraine using the interest from hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Russian assets that have been frozen around the world since shortly after this invasion began 2.5 years ago. That is money that Ukraine will be able to use starting as early as this year to rebuild its shattered infrastructure, build power plants, and to build up its own capacity to produce weaponry so it doesn't have to rely quite as much on the U.S. and on other nations around the world. President Biden, in the press conference that followed that signing, was asked about his son's conviction on felony gun charges earlier this week. It's the first time that President Biden has spoken publicly about that verdict. He said that he will abide by the verdict and that he is not going to pardon his son. He was asked if he would consider commuting his son's sentence when that sentence is handed down a few months from now, and he paused and then responded, no.
Nancy Cordes, thank you. CBS News' chief Washington correspondent, Major Garrett, joins us now. Major, great to see you.
Great to see you, Weege.
So, as you know, President Biden and former President Donald Trump, they have very different worldviews and therefore very different foreign policies. When these leaders sign agreements, communiques, those are not the law of the land.
No.
If President Biden wins, President Trump were to take office, it's a big if, of course, no one knows.
No one knows.
Can you tell us about how all of this could be undone, how foreign policy could be changed in a second?
This is what is called an executive agreement. It's an agreement between the Biden administration and the government led by Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Ukraine. It is essentially two world leaders shaking hands and talking about assurances to one another. If the American presidency is held by former President Trump starting in January of next year, he would have every right, as would any other president, to review this and reject it. And just say, no, that was my predecessor's policy. It is not mine. Might negotiate under different terms or might abolish it entirely. It is a question that looms over this particular agreement because there is tremendous anxiety, not shared by the Biden re-election campaign, but there's tremendous anxiety in Europe that former President Trump is the odds-on favorite to win this. The Economist magazine basically said this week the odds are 2-1 that former President Trump will win the 2024 election. So everyone in Europe is wondering, what is the stability of the Biden presidency, and do these agreements last past effectively November of this year? That's one of the reasons the Biden administration worked so hard to hammer this out, get this thing specified, to try to give it some aspect of solidity. So if former President Trump wins and wants to redo it, he would have a lot farther to go than if there was no policy or no agreement at all.
And of course, something else that is not binding is President Biden's words in an interview at a press conference with regard to what he has said about his son, Hunter. And the other big news today was that for the first time, he said he would not commute Hunter Biden's sentence. Can you talk about why that is important for him to say right now, to make clear, especially given the fact that his opponent was just convicted as well?
So the president wants to draw a very sharp contrast between himself and former President Trump about the rule of law. Does it apply to everyone, even those closest to the president? And if it does, will you respect it? President Biden has now been given several opportunities and has taken every one of them, though hesitantly. He's not eager to wade in on this. You know even better than I do, Weed, how deeply effective this is to him personally. It's a tragedy. It's an internal tragedy for the president to know his son Hunter could go to prison and could go to prison for some extended period of time. But he's not going to pardon him. And importantly, a shouted question from that great press corps traveling with the president, always asking whenever you can, whatever access you have, will you commute? No. That's more information than we had 3 hours ago about what his intentions were to in any way soften the blow, legally speaking, that may be coming to Hunter Biden. That's on the record, and it's now a point of contrast for the president, reluctant though he may be, to acknowledge that he has.
Major Garrett, thank you so much as always.